The Diary of Dr. X, Episode 3. Why Poverty is Useful. As I mentioned in Episode 1, I spent the summer of 2010 doing what I like to think of as unfunded participant observation research concerning the street people in the Osborne village here in Winnipeg. Street people come in various kinds, but they all have two things in common. They live in poverty, and they make a significant percentage of their income in the street, just like I do. Some maintain apartments due to EI or welfare payments, social assistance like myself. Others, the homeless, have lost everything and actually sleep outdoors. Some have tents and sleeping bags, some just a backpack with blankets and all of their other worldly possessions inside, some even less. And I have it on good authority, some sleep outdoors even in minus 32-degree weather here in our Winnipeg winters and know how to survive the experience. I know a couple people who have lived outdoors for 15 years or more. There are various means of generating income in the street when you have almost nothing. Selling drugs or sex are obvious. Much of that takes place in the Sergeant Ellis area, downtown in North Winnipeg. If you're looking for crack or meth or a girl for company, well, that's the place to look. Busking is probably considered one of the most respectable forms of street employment. That's where you play music or otherwise perform in the street for donations. Squeegeeing, or cleaning car windows for money on the street corner, is a little more controversial. And then there is panhandling. This involves simply standing in the street, often with a sign written on cardboard, or perhaps a hat lying on the street in front of you, or in hand, while asking people for money, either silently or aloud, verbally. Finally, there's my form of employment, which I call urban scavenging. And yes, street people generally do consider what they do to earn money in the street as work. When I meet other people in the street and ask them how they're doing, they say, "Oh, I'm off to work." I say the same thing. Now, there are various types of scavengers, too. These include the classical dumpster divers. They actually climb into the dumpsters and comb the trash for anything and everything of value, including opening up any bags that look like they might contain something of value. Many, though, like myself, focus on collecting beer cans and bottles. Some mostly cover the alleys, looking for empties people have left by the dumpster, for example. You can often see them pushing shopping carts up and down the alleys in this area of the world. Others, like myself, specialize in covering all of the areas that the street people themselves leave cans. You see, most of them panhandle or squeegee or busk or whatever for a living, so that they can afford food and other necessities, and maybe some beer, and maybe some weed, of course. You see, as surprising as it may seem, though, given their poverty, and the fact that cans are worth 10 cents a piece in this part of the world, most street people just leave their empties behind. Good for me, right? In the Osborne village, the real people with money often buy a six-pack and drink it in the alley before hitting one of the many bars and clubs in the area, too. Many others will drink one or two that they drop on their way home when they pick up a six-pack or a case. So I don't just focus on the alleys like a lot of the other urban scavengers do. I cover all of the streets, and especially the parks in the area, especially in summer. These are very popular places for drinking by both street and real people until the snow comes. I'm not sure how much in empties I hauled out of the Fort Rouge Park on the Assiniboine River last summer, but it probably approached $200. A lot of cans. Hell, I was averaging over $10 per day in empties for the village as a whole, well over. And I have lots of competition. Think about that for a moment. Over 100 cans per day on average. for an entire summer with several others, well, a dozen or more others, competing for the same resources. Can you imagine how much litter would be lying around the Osborne village if it were not for people like myself? Or imagine if beer cans and bottles were not worth 10 cents apiece at the vendor. Who would bother to pick them up if they were not poor? Nobody. You would have to pay someone to do it. So you see, poverty does have its usefulness. It helps keep the streets clean. Take cigarette butts as another example. They account for a good percentage of litter in the streets by absolute numbers, though maybe not quantity or total weight. But can you imagine how many more there would be if not for poor people like myself, who happen to be smokers, who spend several hours a day picking them up so they can crush the tobacco out of them and roll them up with blue zigzags and smoke them like this. So you see, poverty can be socially useful. Do you want your street clear of litter? Just put a bounty on it. And there are people available who will do the job for next to nothing per hour, like me. Too many Tim Hortons coffee cups in the street? Put a bounty on them. Somebody will pick them up for you. Want your shopping carts returned? Put a bounty on them. Supermarkets are way ahead of the curve when it comes to exploiting the poor. In fact, anything at all you want cleared off the streets can be cleaned up just by offering the poor money for it. And it helps to divert tons of waste out of the landfill and into recycling. Yay! Just think of all the beer cans the dumpster divers rescue from the landfill. So to say the least, as a radical ecologist, I have a good conscience at the end of the day of a good day of scavenging, which I bask in as I get drunk before I go to bed. But aside from the ecological benefits, just think about how much income we could provide to the poor by employing this strategy. So don't ever tell me that poverty isn't useful. And don't tell me there are not ways to help the poor when there are so many obvious ways to provide them with additional revenue streams available to creative policymakers in various levels of government, or even in business. Hell, maybe this is why the capitalist system is designed in such a way as to generate poverty. Because it certainly isn't because of its ecological benefits.